Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is the sequel to Final Fantasy VII Remake, making it the second game in the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy. Although there's one thing that Rebirth has that Remake didn't, and that's the fact that people now know a little bit more about what to expect from the game in terms of the story that it's trying to tell. That doesn't mean that we actually know where the story is heading, of course, but we do know that it's going to be a mixture of old familiar stops and new twists that will end up creating something that is entirely distinct from the original Final Fantasy VII, while still building on that same foundation. Therefore, I went into Final Fantasy VII Rebirth with the expectation that the game would be trying to pull off a gentle balancing act between having its cake and eating it too, by staying faithful to the original game while also introducing new and exciting elements. It of course does that to a certain extent, but overall there seems to be quite a bit of cake eating in the game, so I hope you like cake. Hello everyone, I'm Nökkvi from Birds of Play, and welcome to our spoiler-free review of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for more Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but for now, let's just talk about the game, because the sooner I get this over with, the sooner I can get back to playing the game.
Wow.
Leaving the dark and dreary Midgar behind, after the end of the first game, we get the feeling that a great big world is out there waiting for us, and Rebirth manages to deliver on that promise. The game is filled with sprawling landscapes and towns, and sometimes you get the feeling that you don't even have time to take it all in. A lot of the time, games seem to want to force you to experience all the great content they have to offer, so it's kind of refreshing how laid back Rebirth is. It sometimes reminded me of the original Sonic games, because you keep running through these epic areas without ever needing to look back. The game doesn't always manage to keep up though, so there is some texture popping from time to time, but when the game shines, it really shines. My biggest issues were probably with the lighting, as it can get really dark when you move in between brightly lit and dimly lit areas, but in general, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth delivered on some awe-inspiring visuals that continue to occupy a place in my mind even after I finish playing it. Not that I'm in any way done playing it, because this is a game that will have me coming back for more for a long time, I imagine. Which is interesting because Remake didn't really elicit the same response for me personally. One playthrough was mostly enough, even though I really liked it. One thing that differentiates Rebirth from Remake is the freedom to explore, and the 6 areas present in the game all feature plenty of opportunities to drink in the game world and uncover the lore of the game. Running around feels fast, so getting between places is usually pleasant enough. However, the game sometimes presents the player with the illusion of freedom, as it's not always apparent which obstacles you're able to jump over or jump down from, leading you to run into invisible walls from time to time. For the most part, the game will have you running around solving various objectives around the map, as has become customary in these sorts of open-world games ever since Assassin's Creed came out, but some of the missions also feature a very human element, which gives us a better glimpse into the lives of the people who occupy the world of Final Fantasy VII, not to mention that some of them can be quite humorous, and humor is something that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has a lot of. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a game that is unapologetically silly at times, and that's actually one of its greatest strengths, because it's never silly at the expense of its characters or the overall story. Instead, the levity adds to just how fun the journey ends up becoming, and lets players enjoy their time with the party even more, not to mention that the craziness of it all feels like an appropriate homage to the original Final Fantasy VII, which was also quite crazy at times. But speaking of the party, one of the highlights of the game is definitely sharing this journey with the wonderful cast. The cast of Final Fantasy VII has of course long since become legendary, but never before have they been this fleshed out. Of course, it's inevitable that not everyone is going to like how the characters transition from the more abstract personas in the original Final Fantasy VII to their more fully fleshed out versions, but to me, it feels like a sensible approach, which does more to add to my love for them rather than detract. They feel like themselves and they make sense in the world of the game.
Let's get this party started!
Another thing that feels very reminiscent of the original Final Fantasy VII is the absolute smorgasbord of minigames present in the game. There are actually so many minigames that I fully sympathize with people who might feel a bit overwhelmed at times. With that said, I think that the minigames are generally quite good, the best one no doubt being Queen's Blood, the card game. To be honest, I didn't quite understand the rules of the game right away, but once I got into it, it became an experience all of its own, so I highly recommend pushing through that initial learning phase until you get to the good part. There are also plenty of other gimmicks that break up the gameplay and prevent it from becoming too monotonous, as each dungeon features something new to do. I won't say that these gimmicks are always a welcome diversion, but they never get too tedious either, even though some dungeons themselves can start to wear out their welcome a bit when all you want is the next piece of story.
Could you look after my friend? Just for a bit. Too much Mako, but he'll be fine.
Without spoiling the story, I can say that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth manages to do the story of the original Final Fantasy VII justice, while also presenting the player with plenty of its own intrigue. At its best, it brings the original to life, while also keeping you on your toes about what's to come. At its worst, however, it can also feel a bit convoluted and hard to grasp, which results in some of the more emotional moments not hitting as hard as they otherwise might have. The game plays fast and loose with some of the story beats of the original, as well as rearranges some of them, but all of that can be considered a part of the fun, I think. Some characters may feel a bit underutilized, especially considering how one would have thought they would play a bigger role in the story, but overall the story managed to get me excited for what will come next and how the unknown journey will continue.
I should go. Mother is waiting.
Thanks for watching our spoiler-free review of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I hope you liked it and that you get a chance to give the game a go yourself, because I highly recommend it, especially if you're a Final Fantasy fan. And if you're a Final Fantasy fan, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more Final Fantasy content. We plan to make a lot of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth content, so I hope to see you around. But until next time, cuckoo!